You can know someone for years, share meals with them, confide in them, build what feels like genuine intimacy, and still have no idea who they actually are. Not because you're naive, not because you weren't paying attention, but because the version of themselves they've been showing you was never the real one. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. He spent his entire career studying the gap between who people appear to be and who they actually are underneath, and he found that gap is far wider than most of us want to believe. Jung observed something unsettling in his decades of work. Most people never reveal their true character during normal circumstances. When life is comfortable, when the social contract is being honored, when there's nothing at stake, almost everyone looks decent, kind even. They smile at the right moments, they say the right things, they perform the version of themselves that earns approval and keeps relationships stable. But this performance tells you absolutely nothing about who they are. It only tells you who they've learned to pretend to be. Jung called this the persona, the mask a person constructs for the world. And he was relentless about pointing out that the persona is not character, it's costume, it's strategy. It's the face someone wears when they're aware they're being watched and evaluated. The persona is designed to manage perception, not to reveal truth. And the terrifying implication of Jung's work is that you can spend decades relating to someone's persona while never once encountering the actual person behind it. So how do you see through it? How do you know who someone really is when they've spent their entire life perfecting the art of appearing to be someone they're not? Jung found that true character doesn't emerge during pleasant dinners or casual conversations. It reveals itself in very specific conditions, moments when the persona can't hold, when the mask slips because the psychological pressure is too great to maintain the performance. And after years of observation, he identified two situations that strip the persona away completely and expose who someone actually is at their core. Today I'm going to show you these two situations, why they work so reliably to expose true character according to Jung's framework, how to recognize what you're seeing when the mask drops, and why most people ignore these revelations, even when they're staring them directly in the face. The first thing that reveals someone's true character is what they do with your vulnerability, not how they respond to your strength, your confidence, your best moments. What they do when you're exposed, when you've shared something painful, something shameful, something that gives them information they could use against you. That moment, what happens in the space right after you've handed someone a piece of yourself that you can't take back, tells you more about their actual character than years of ordinary interaction ever could. Jung understood vulnerability as a psychological litmus test because it creates an immediate power asymmetry. When you reveal a wound, a fear, a failure, an insecurity, you've placed yourself in a position of exposure. The other person now holds something about you that you can't unhave shared. And what they do with that power reveals what lives underneath their persona in ways nothing else can. Jung observed three distinct patterns in how people handle someone else's vulnerability. The first pattern is what he called holding. A person with genuine character receives your vulnerability and treats it as sacred. They don't minimize it. They don't rush to fix it. They don't make it about themselves. They hold it. They let you be exposed without punishing you for the exposure. They demonstrate through their response that your vulnerability is safe with them. And critically, they never, not in the heat of an argument, not when they're hurt, not when the relationship is strained, use what you shared as ammunition. It stays held, protected, honored. The second pattern Jung identified was far more common and far more damaging. He called it storage. The person appears to receive your vulnerability with warmth. They say the right things in the moment. They perform empathy. They seem safe. But they're not holding your vulnerability. They're filing it, cataloging it, storing it for future use. And you won't know the difference between holding and storage until a conflict arises. Until they're angry or threatened or losing control of the dynamic. That's when what was stored gets weaponized. The thing you shared in your most exposed moment gets thrown back at you during a fight. Your deepest insecurity becomes their sharpest tool. The fear you trusted them with becomes the exact thing they use to destabilize you when they need leverage. Jung considered this one of the most psychologically violent things a person can do because it doesn't just damage trust. It damages the victim's relationship with their own vulnerability permanently. Once someone has used your openness against you, a part of your psyche learns that vulnerability equals danger, that sharing yourself honestly is a tactical error, that exposure leads to exploitation. And this lesson doesn't stay contained to that one relationship. It follows you into every relationship after. It makes you guarded, defended, unwilling to open. Not because you lack courage, but because your nervous system learned through experience that openness gets punished. The third pattern Jung documented was immediate dismissal. The person doesn't store your vulnerability for later use. They reject it on the spot. They minimize what you've shared, change the subject, make you feel dramatic or weak for being open. It's not that bad. Everyone goes through that. You're overthinking it. This response reveals a character that cannot tolerate emotional depth, not in others and certainly not in themselves. They dismiss your vulnerability because the existence of it threatens their own carefully maintained defenses. If they acknowledged your pain as real, they'd have to acknowledge their own, so they shut it down and make you feel foolish for offering it. Jung was fascinated by how reliably this single test exposed character because it bypassed every social performance a person had mastered. Someone can fake kindness for years. They can perform generosity, warmth, loyalty, all of it convincingly. But the moment you hand them genuine vulnerability, their actual relationship with power, intimacy, and emotional safety becomes visible. And that relationship is their real character, regardless of how skillfully their persona has hidden it. Think about the people in your life right now, not what they say about loyalty and love, what they've actually done with the vulnerable things you've shared. Do they hold it? Have they stored it and used it when they needed control? Did they dismiss it entirely? Your answer to that question tells you who they actually are, not who they perform being, who they are when they have power over something precious and fragile that belongs to you. If you're sitting with those questions right now, running through the people in your life and feeling the weight of what their answers reveal, I created the True Self-Discovery Guide for moments exactly like this one. 24 reflection exercises rooted in Jung's work to help you see clearly without looking away. It's in the description below. The second thing that reveals someone's true character is how they respond when you grow, not how they react to your failures, your struggles, your need for support, but what happens in their eyes, in their body, in their behavior when you become stronger, more successful, more whole than you were before. Jung considered this the most reliable test of character because almost everyone can perform support when you're struggling. Helping someone in pain makes people feel noble, generous, needed. It reinforces their self-image as a good person. But celebrating someone's growth, genuinely, without any contamination of envy or threat. That requires a character most people don't possess. Jung studied this dynamic extensively because he recognized it as one of the shadow's most reliable triggers. When someone close to you grows, gets promoted, finds a healthy relationship, develops confidence, discovers their voice, heals a wound that used to make them dependent, it activates the shadow in everyone around them. Not because those people are evil, but because another person's growth forces a confrontation with their own stagnation. Your expansion becomes a mirror reflecting everything they haven't done, haven't faced, haven't become. And most people's shadow cannot tolerate that mirror without reacting. Jung identified several ways people reveal their true character through their response to someone else's growth. The first is genuine celebration. This is rarer than most people think. True celebration of another's growth means feeling joy in their expansion without needing to reference yourself. Not, "I'm so proud of you" from a position of superiority. Not, "I always knew you could do it" as a way of claiming credit. Just pure recognition that someone you care about is becoming more fully themselves, and that their becoming doesn't diminish you. Jung found this response primarily in people who had done significant work on their own shadow, people who had confronted their own envy, their own insecurity, their own fear of inadequacy, and integrated those parts rather than letting them run the show unconsciously. The second response is what Jung called covert sabotage. This is the person who says all the right things about your growth while subtly undermining it. They congratulate you on the new job, then spend 20 minutes talking about how stressful that industry is. They celebrate your new relationship, then casually mention how your partner reminds them of your ex. They praise your healing, then bring up old wounds in ways that pull you back into the version of yourself they're comfortable with. This sabotage is almost impossible to identify in real time because it's wrapped in the language of care. They're not attacking your growth. They're expressing concern. They're not threatened by your success. They're just being realistic. They're not trying to keep you small. They're protecting you from disappointment. Every act of sabotage is disguised as love, which is precisely what makes it so psychologically devastating. Jung recognized this pattern as the shadow operating through the persona. The person's conscious self genuinely believes they're being supportive. Their persona performs celebration convincingly. But underneath, their shadow is terrified of what your growth means for the dynamic between you. If you heal, they can't be your healer. If you succeed, they can't be above you. If you become whole, they can't be needed by you in the ways that give them identity and purpose. So, the shadow sabotages while the persona smiles, and the person has no conscious awareness that they're doing it. The third response Jung documented was open hostility disguised as honesty. This is the person who, when confronted with your growth, suddenly becomes brutally honest about your flaws. You share good news, and they respond with criticism they've supposedly been holding back. You demonstrate strength, and they remind you of every time you were weak. You show confidence, and they bring up failures. They frame this as keeping it real, or making sure you don't get a big head, or just being honest because I care about you. But Jung saw through this performance immediately. What they're actually doing is trying to dismantle your growth because your expansion threatens the psychological contract they built with your smaller self. This is why Jung emphasized that growth is the most dangerous thing you can do to your relationships. Not because growth is wrong, but because it exposes every relationship that was built on you staying wounded, staying dependent, staying small. And the people who need you diminished will reveal themselves the moment you start expanding. Their character was always there, but it was hidden because the conditions never forced it to surface. Your growth creates exactly the conditions that strip the persona away. Jung also found a fourth response that might be the most telling of all: withdrawal. The person doesn't sabotage, doesn't attack, doesn't compete. They simply disappear. They stop calling. They become unavailable. The friendship that seemed solid when you were both struggling suddenly has no foundation when you start thriving. Because the entire bond was built on shared woundedness, and your healing broke the unspoken agreement. These people don't have the self-awareness to know why they're pulling away. They just feel uncomfortable around you now, and they interpret that discomfort as the relationship running its course. But Jung would say the discomfort is their shadow, recognizing that you've outgrown the container. They need you to stay inside. Pay attention to what happened the last time you grew. The last time you set a boundary you'd never set before. The last time you made a decision that honored yourself instead of managing someone else's comfort. The last time you succeeded at something meaningful. Who celebrated without agenda? Who suddenly had concerns they'd never mentioned? Who became distant without explanation? Who turned critical right when you needed support most? Their responses weren't random. They were character revealed under pressure. The pressure of your expansion stripped away their performance and showed you exactly who they'd been all along. Jung connected both of these revelations, what someone does with your vulnerability and how they respond to your growth, to a single psychological principle. He argued that true character is what emerges when someone's ego is under threat. When you're vulnerable, you've given someone power they didn't earn, and their character determines whether they protect that power or exploit it. When you grow, you've threatened someone's psychological position, and their character determines whether they celebrate your expansion or try to contain it. In both cases, the ego is being pressured, and ego under pressure is where the persona breaks. It's where the mask can't hold. It's where the carefully constructed performance of who someone is collapses and you see the raw, unmanaged truth of who they actually are. Jung believed this was the only way to truly know someone, not by listening to what they say about themselves, not by observing them in comfortable conditions, but by watching what happens when their ego encounters a situation it can't control. This is why Jung advised people to be students of behavior rather than consumers of words. Someone can tell you they love you, that they'd never hurt you, that they want the best for you, and they might even believe it when they say it. But words are products of the persona. They're manufactured by the part of the psyche designed to manage perception. Behavior under pressure is the product of actual character, the parts of the psyche that operate beneath conscious management. And when words and pressured behavior contradict each other, Jung was unequivocal about which one to trust. Trust the behavior. Always trust the behavior. The difficulty, and Jung was honest about this, is that most people don't want to see what these two tests reveal. When someone weaponizes your vulnerability, the pain of that betrayal is so overwhelming that it's easier to make excuses. They were stressed. They didn't mean it. They just fight dirty sometimes. When someone sabotages your growth, it's easier to believe you're being paranoid than to accept that someone you love needs you broken to feel comfortable. Seeing character clearly means accepting that some people in your life are not who you believe them to be. and that acceptance carries grief that most people will do anything to avoid. But Jung would tell you that the grief of seeing clearly is infinitely less destructive than the ongoing damage of relating to someone's persona while ignoring their character. Every time you override what these tests reveal, you hand your vulnerability to someone who will use it, and your growth to someone who will punish it. And you do this not because you're foolish, but because the alternative, accepting the truth about someone you love, feels like it would destroy you. It won't destroy you. What destroys you is pretending you don't see what you see. What destroys you is choosing the comfortable lie of someone's persona over the uncomfortable truth of their character. What destroys you is staying loyal to who someone performs, being while the person they actually are damages you in ways you've learned to normalize. Jung spent his life trying to help people develop the courage to see clearly, not to become cynical or paranoid, but to become honest, to watch what people do with your soft moments and your strong ones, to pay attention to the behavior that emerges when ego is threatened rather than the words spoken when everything is calm, to trust what these two tests reveal, even when trusting it means fundamentally restructuring your understanding of someone you thought you knew. These two things, what someone does with your vulnerability and how they respond to your growth, are not just personality preferences or communication styles. They are the architecture of someone's actual character made visible. They show you whether someone can be trusted with the most fragile and the most powerful parts of who you are. They reveal whether you're in a relationship with the real person or with a performance that only holds together when you stay wounded and available to be used. Watch for these two things, not obsessively, not paranoidly, but honestly. Let people show you who they are through what they do when your openness gives them power and when your growth threatens their position. And when they show you, believe them, not the version of them you wish were true, not the potential you see in them, not the person they are on their best days when nothing is at stake. Believe the character that emerges when the mask can't hold. That's who they are. That's who they've always been. And knowing that, really knowing it, is the beginning of every wise decision you'll ever make about who deserves access to your life. And if you're ready to take that honest look, not just at the people around you, but at the character you've been building underneath your own mask, the True Self-Discovery Guide is in the description. 24 exercises to help you start seeing clearly and living from what you find.